Hi, my name's Chris Baseford. I'm a recording engineer, producer, and mixer based in Los Angeles. I'm going to show you StudioRack from Waves, which is an amazing new plugin that lets you configure your own plugin chains all within one plugin. One of the preset chains that I've built here is one for lead vocals. So I'm going to play a bit of the track here.
Stuck in a cage, stuck at the draw, I was away, gotta get out. Lord, I gotta find one, give me a key, put me in lock, gotta be free, ready or not, gotta run, gotta run.
The first thing in my chain, I've got the NLS channel, which is simulating some console saturation there. I've got a vocal rider, which is just evening out the level for me. I've got an F6 that's doing some dynamic EQ. I've got a VEQ4 that's doing some kind of broad stroke EQ. I used to use the old version of StudioRack, and I used to build these similar plugin chains. One of the amazing things about the new StudioRack is that it's got parallel splits and multiband splits. So this chain, I've utilized a parallel split. So once I come out of the VEQ, I go to a parallel split, which lets you add parallel processing lanes. I've got one here with an 1176. I've got one here with a Fairchild. And I've got one here with an L1. And then you've got separate volume controls for each one. And then these get summed back down into your single lane here. Then I've got some de-essing going on, another EQ, and then some Abbey Road saturation, which is one of my favorite plugins. So let's have a quick listen without StudioRack.
Stuck in a cage, stuck at the draw, I was away, gotta get out. Lord, I gotta find one, give me a key, put me in lock, gotta be free, ready or not, gotta run, gotta run.
Okay, now we'll turn it on, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to start just turning one thing on at a time as I walk through it. The NLS channel, most of you probably know what that is here. Really cool console saturation. I have it on the kind of the SSL mode here.
Stuck in a cage, stuck at the draw, I was away, gotta get out. Lord, I gotta find one, give me a key, put me in lock.
Adding some nice drive there. The vocal rider, really great tool just to even out the level before hitting compressors. I always use this before the compression, and just so that the compressor's seeing a more even level before it even does anything.
Stuck in a cage, stuck at the draw, I was away, gotta get out. Lord, I gotta find one, give me a key, put me in.
And here's another cool thing about StudioRack is you've got these macros here on the side that you can assign parameters to. So without really opening up Vocal Rider, I can utilize this macro here to control the sensitivity on the target.
Stuck in a cage, stuck at the draw, I was away, gotta get out. Lord, I gotta find.
And then I can use this for makeup gain if it's needed. So that's a really cool thing. One of the plugins that I use pretty much on every vocal these days is the F6. And F6 has a lot of parameters in it. The StudioRack macros really gives you some options to assign some of these parameters to the macros and make this plugin a lot simpler. But how I use this plugin is to just notch out dynamically some of the mid-range and woof in a vocal here. So we'll do a before and after here as well. It might be kind of subtle because it's fast.
Stuck in a cage, stuck at the draw, I was away, gotta get out. Lord, I gotta find one, give me a key, put me in lock, gotta be free, ready or not, gotta run, gotta run.
So that just tames everything for me. And I've utilized the macro here for the mix knob. So
stuck in a cage, stuck at the draw, I was away, gotta get
can
out.
use
Lord, I
this
gotta find one, give me.
and just blend in some of the notching, or you can have it full tilt, which I usually leave it on full tilt. But if it's just sounds a little too processed, you can back it off. And again, you don't have to go into the plugin to do that. It's all stored right here in the macros. The next plugin I've got is the VEQ4, which I'm adding a little top end and taking out a little bit of the high mids, which I typically do on just about every vocal. So I've programmed that in the macro knobs here as well.
Stuck in a cage, stuck at the draw, I was away, gotta get out. Lord, I gotta find one, give me a key, put me in lock, gotta be free, ready or not, gotta run, gotta run.
It's nice being able to use those macros without having to go into the plugin and really kind of open up windows all over the place. So here is where one of the real magical things about StudioRack exists, the parallel split. Let's have a quick look at how I used to do this. This used to be one audio track feeding an additional 2 auxiliaries, those auxiliaries feeding into another auxiliary. This now all takes place right here. What's really cool about this is you can also automate pretty much anything in this plugin. So I've got 3 different flavors of compression going on at the same time, and you can blend them in however you want, which is pretty awesome. The other thing you can do is you can solo, you can turn stuff on and off, you can change the levels, you can flip phase. You've basically got all the controls that you would have if you had them all spread out on different tracks, but now you've got them all in one plugin with even more options to do various routing that would have been very difficult outside of this. And you can save a preset. So you can basically get to it from any session. You can import it. You can just pull it up on the preset list. A couple last things here. Sibilance I've got as my de-esser here. And that I've set the macros.
Stuck in a cage, lock up the draw, hours away, gotta get out. Lord, I gotta find one, give me a key, put me a lock, gotta be free, ready and now.
And then we've got our SSL channel here, rolling off a little low end after everything's been done here. And then I've got the Abbey Road saturator, again, assigned to a macro here. So I can just control the Abbey Road. I've labeled it Excite, just adds an exciter because I've got some of the compander in there as well.
Stuck in a cage, lock up the draw, hours away, gotta get out. Lord, I gotta find one, give me a key, put me a lock, gotta be free, ready and not, gotta run, gotta run.
So another really cool thing about StudioRack is you can assign multiple parameters to a single macro. Even as something as simple as like with the CLA 76. 1176 doesn't have automatic makeup control. So as you increase the input, the whole thing gets louder. And then you have to bring down the output. So you can assign both of these knobs to one macro, and as you turn up the input, the output comes down. And that's something that I've utilized in some of my other presets, but it's definitely something to note because it's a huge, even just for compressors as like a faux auto gain makeup, it's pretty incredible. Having the ability to do these parallel lanes within one plugin, I personally find a lot of the time when people do use parallel processing, they trick themselves into thinking that it sounds better than it actually does, simply because whenever they turn on the additional tracks, it adds up and the volume is louder. This lets you turn on and A/B all the parallel lanes without fooling yourself, because you can turn on and off the parallel lanes right here using your volume knobs here. So you can listen to 3 compressors all running in parallel versus the dry signal and adjust the volume so you're hearing that at the same level and not fool yourself, where you're actually hearing the difference as to whether or not it sounds better and not just louder. So that's another great thing about being able to have all of this control within one plugin on one parallel split slot there.
Stuck in a cage, lock up the draw, hours away, gotta get out. Lord, I gotta find one, give me a key,